that I have a pattern when it comes to many of my reflections. So the cynical way of describing this pattern is that I give you a problem that you didn't know you had, convince you that you do indeed have it, and then heroically solve it for you. So in that way, church is like going to a movie and has about the same impact. Of course, as is the case with most cynical takes, that is neither very generous nor accurate, I hope. Though there is a certain amount of truth to it. I do present you with a problem, but I think it's more fair to say that it is a problem that you have already thought about. Or if not, it is a problem whose existence is rather easy for you to understand. And then, do I solve it for you? Maybe sometimes. But I hope that the solution, if there is one, almost invariably comes down to one key ingredient: work. And work, let's just say, I hope I do not let you off the hook, right? I hope resolution is compelling rather than appeasing. I don't want you to leave depressed or distressed, but I don't want you to leave solved, but rather resolved to do something. And maybe that's just make a little bit more space in the week for some self-observation. So generally, this method of reflection, public reflection, is effective, I hope. And that's basic storytelling, really, with a difference being there's a call to action at the end, with a greater or lesser degree of clarity, depending on the Sunday. It's also, by the way, not entirely intentional that I do it this way. It's something that I've observed about myself. So it's how I write the reflection. So it's the reflection working its way through me is generally how it's presented at the end. So there is, to my own self, I present myself with a problem I didn't know I had, convince myself I had it, and then try to get my way out of the maze. So, today then, guess what? We have a problem. And here's our problem. We're on the verge of extinction. Now, I don't mean ecological extinction. And when I say we, what I mean is that we, as members of a fading cohort, we religious institutionalists, probably freaks you use out to think of themselves that way. But that is indeed what Unitarian Universalism is. It's a religious institution. So we Unitarian Universalists, we subscribe to a form, institutional religion, that is trending toward extinction in our country, in our culture. Our cause appears to be dying and is taking something of us, something quite personal, I think, with it. Institutional liberal religion is, to read the headlines, gasping its last. And while this remains more dramatically true of the mainline Protestant denominations, the waning tide threatens to take Unitarian Universalism down the drain with it. We used to be able to claim, smugly in my case, that we UUs were not shrinking. Sure, we weren't keeping up with the population growth in the U.S., so our percent of the population was shrinking. But unlike our long-lost Protestant cousins, we were maintaining our absolute numbers. In fact, between 1982 and 2000, fun fact, between You're either going to love this sermon or you're going to hate it. We'll have a conversation afterwards, John. Between 1982 and because there's lots of data in there. So between 1982 and 2009, the national numbers of Unitarian Universalists actually grew by nearly 20%. That's a lot. 1982 to 2009, 20%. However, between 2009 and 2015, we lost 5% of our adults and 7% of our kids. In that same time, the U.S. population grew by 5%, so we're not only not keeping up, we're stepping back. Already considered a fringe tradition by the unimaginative majority, our current trajectory has us queuing up for irrelevancy. So in case that headline induces a shrug, here's what's at stake. Non-dogmatic religion. There are not a lot of non-dogmatic religions. We are a brave and courageous minority. It sometimes makes it hard to be a UU when you don't have that easy dogma to hang your hat on. But that is also what makes it personally meaningful to be a UU, because the work is done by each of us, by each of you. And that makes it important in a historical sense, that there is such a thing as Unitarian Universalism. It's important historically. So, non-dogmatic religion is at stake. Liberal religion is at stake. So, the need for participation in a religious institution may go dormant, but it will not disappear. And when it comes back, if there's no liberal religion here to receive it, people will go to a more conservative place, theologically speaking, religiously speaking. A place with dogma, a place with orthodoxy, which in my mind both contribute to intolerance, and intolerance oftentimes leads to much darker outcomes. So liberal religion is at stake. Also at stake is our center. At our center is a concern with how we treat one another. So this is in contrast with dogmatic, theologically dogmatic, ontologically dogmatic, or mythological centers of other faiths. Our center is how we treat each other. We could have the beliefs and sources that are mythical, theological, and ontological, but they are not at the center. Our tradition is founded on relationship. Now there is a powerful, so when I say ontological, that means like words about being. Theology means words about God, but we could say words about spirit. Let's just do that. So there is a powerful ontological and or theological perspective inherent in our foundation, that relationship is at the center. Nonetheless, it is the relationship that we name as primary. Then there's simply the power of community centered on liberal religious values. Community shapes us. Community holds us accountable. It holds us in care. Community challenges our assumptions, lifts us up when we're down, and cheers when we're up. We are bound by covenant, by the promises that we make to one another. And that has a profound normative effect. It has the effect of shaping our lives and our character. It empowers us and compels us just being in community. And then, of course, there is the power for us, what we will lose is that, the community. And we will lose possibly the power of orienting to something bigger than ourselves. Something that's not just about our values, but deeper than that, the assumptions behind our values. But here together we can investigate and articulate those assumptions. They could be challenged. They can be nurtured. Here we have an opportunity to explore those assumptions behind our values and act on them to the betterment of our being, to the betterment of our relationships, to the betterment of our world. This is a place where we come together to overcome fear, to encourage freedom, and to find compassion, both in ourselves and each other. So the numbers are declining. Our numbers are declining. And personally and culturally, the stakes are tremendous. The stakes are high. And the chips, as they say, are down. So if this were a musical and not a movie, we would start the second act with a big musical number that would get you all ramped up and make you glad that you came back. I don't have that number. And I'm also don't have the ability to save you from this tiger of numerical national decline in our beloved tradition. I do have some questions. What is going on? How do we save Unitarian Universalism, and who are the bright lights among our people that we can look to save it? First of all, I think we can all feel pretty comfortable in saying, blame the millennials. Everyone's doing it. Totally their fault with their cell phones and their award certificates of participation. I mean, where's the commitment? Actually, that's terrible. Blame the boomers. Summer of love, eco-paradise promises, and subsequent climate disaster and perpetual of war inheritance. And then they're retiring. Where's the follow-through? Okay, we'll just blame Generation X for actually, never mind. The truth is, actually, that UU is a multi-generational affair. The truth is that the past and the future are present in the present. Look around. The other truth, of course, is that our problem is worse than I've described. Or not worse, actually. Okay, so the challenge is more difficult than just numbers, right? The challenge is more difficult than just numbers. And actually, just to ease off a little bit, in some ways, it's not so bad. Depends on how you look at it. While it's true that Unitarian Universalism lost 5% of membership, which is about 10,000 members, and add another 2,000, it's also true that from at least 09 to 15, mainline Protestant membership is down 13%, which is 5 million people. So we could at least still be smug. But also, due to that 20% increase toward the end of the 20th century in Unitarian Universalism, we have about the same amount now as we did in 2001. And while we may be losing members in our geographical heritage areas around the Northeast, which had a higher percentage of UUs than elsewhere, it is also true that between 2001 and 2011, 34 states saw gains in Unitarian Universalist membership. That's 70% of the states in the U.S. What's more, every state in the western region, every state west of Texas, gained members, except for Utah and Wyoming. And Wyoming lost a whopping net of 6 people. So like everyone left the state. There's someone here from Wyoming last week, sorry. Okay. He's one of them. That is less one. So this means that in the West, Unitarian Universalism is actually growing. So it's not all doom and gloom. And that's just the numbers, though, of course. We haven't even asked those numbers any questions yet. We haven't asked why or what they might indicate. For instance, coupled with the Protestant decline, they may indicate that the culture as a whole is valuing the idea of religion less. I'm not so sure that's true, and if it is, I think it's a mistake on the part of our culture and an opportunity for us that we have not yet figured out how to capitalize on. Or the numbers could indicate that people in the East are moving west. And that the Western UU churches are maybe doing something different than the Eastern UU churches, or have a different context within which to grow. It has been pointed out to me also that by some colleagues that it is the unhealthy congregations that are shedding members, while the healthy congregations are gaining. It seems a little obvious, but maybe we could dig a little deeper there. I think that may raise the question, at least one question of its own. It may indicate that our fundamentals are still fine. Our non-dogmatic theology and congregational polity, that means how we're organized. Polity means how we're organized. Congregation is the highest level of authority in our tradition, and our congregational polity and our non-dogmatic theology, talk about spirit, is fine. The putting of relationship at our center is a good idea. And yet, perhaps, in some of these congregations, those relationships, that behavior is messed up. It may be that our fundamentals are not being applied very well in some cases. And that has a lot of responsibility to dole out, right? And I think a lot of that falls on the ministry, in fact. So we wonder about that. These numbers may not be indicative of a decline so much as a transformation, where the old self finds itself changed before a new self has fully emerged. So that could result in the loss of some who found us familiar before a change, where we haven't changed fully enough to attract people who don't know that we exist. Does that make sense? That wasn't a very good sentence, but I'm hoping you know. Okay. So we could go on with this speculation. It does lead to some compelling thought exercises that may even yield fruit in terms of theology, polity, or programming. But the numbers and the things that they may indicate are decidedly not the point. This is the point. Delicious. Not the future, not the past, but right now, and what you're doing right now. Anytime you hear doom about Unitarian Universalism, think of it as an invitation. More than that, think of it as a calling. Calling you to reflect your values, our shared values, and how you embody them in that moment. And in the next moment. And when you get there, in that moment. Because here's the truth. I know some fantastic leaders in this denomination. God, does Donald Trump always say that? Does he say, I just feel like during campaign season, I feel like I start to embody all the candidates. Does he say, and so here's the truth, and then tell a lie or something? But this is true. I know some fantastic leaders in this denomination and in this congregation. And leaders and leadership are crucial. However, they are not the bright lights who will save Unitarian Universalism. This is the bright lights that will save Unitarian Universalism. It's a little blurry, so I think we've got some work to do. Some things just work out perfectly. These are who will save Unitarian Universalism. And that will happen in every moment. That will happen when that strawberry is delicious. Now, incidentally, these are also the same people who gather together every Sunday to worship and who gather together in community to celebrate all our gifts and talents. And this is a convenient segue into plugging our All Gifts and Talents talent show, which is coming up. When is it coming up, Joe?
I think if I look up there, it's going to be April 2nd.